When I joined the Scottish Rite, I was given a copy of Clausen's commentaries on morals and dogma. I found the book of great value. They had stopped giving out morals and dogma a few years before I joined, but I found the Clausen book valuable. As I've said many times before, joining the Scottish Rite was like coming home for me. It was exactly what I was looking for in Masonry. I could see the lessons of honor, integrity, duty, service, and so much more. I wanted to learn everything I could about this system. I didn't know anything about Albert Pike or morals and dogma, but because of the title of the book that I was given, it made me ask. I was told that morals and dogma used to be given to all new members of the Southern jurisdiction, but they stopped giving it out, at least as I was told, because no one ever read it. I found that to be an extremely odd answer. Why would no one read it? They gave the book out to all new members for about 100 years. Why would they give out that many books if no one read it? It made no sense to me. That answer made me want to obtain a copy even more. After a while, I did find a copy of Morals and Dogma in a used bookstore. It was a big book, and I could see rather quickly that the style in which it was written made it a difficult read. But I didn't spend that much time thinking about why it was written as it was written. I just took the book at face value. I could see that Morals and Dogma contained some valuable information, but I could also see that it was not an actual handbook of the Scottish Rite degrees. I couldn't take the book and directly or easily apply it to that much of what I saw in the Scottish Rite. The book seemed to be an unconnected, if still allied, commentary on the degrees. I didn't know if the writing style was due to the time in which it was written or just the writing style of Albert Pike. I also felt that the book was more of a secondary source of instruction. I suspected that it might serve me better if I first studied the Scottish Rite and then took the time to delve into this clearly complex book. No one I knew seemed to be able to guide me in this matter, so I just put it aside for a few years. Since I was in New Orleans, and this was my source of information on the philosophy of the Scottish Rite, it was impossible to avoid the history of the Louisiana Scottish Rite in my studies. And as to that history, I was amazed, shocked, and deeply disappointed at how some, inside and outside of Louisiana, could take what I saw as a pure philosophy and so corrupt it. The examples that I saw of out-of-control ego, hunger for power, and pretty much everything that the Scottish Rite stood against was in full display by the U.S. Scottish Rite Masons of the mid-1800s. I wasn't prepared for that, and it did deeply affect me. My study of the philosophy of the Scottish Rite began to merge with the history of the Louisiana Scottish Rite. It was around this time that I found a few letters that made me pull out my copy of Morals and Dogma. I found copies of several letters written by Albert Pike to his superiors during the Civil War. What struck me right off was that the letters were clear as a bell. What was being said in the letters was not as important to me as how it was being said. I had to pull out Morals and Dogma to see if I had made a mistake in my evaluation of his writing style. But I had not made a mistake. Morals and Dogma was written in a very distinct style that was very different from those letters that Pike had written to his superiors. Pike was not only a Masonic philosopher, but he was also a skilled communicator who was able to adjust his manner of writing based on his audience. I found this fascinating and wanted to understand more of the man. I remember taking an English class in college that was very different from other courses. I was majoring in communications, and this was an English class with a focus on communications. I learned a lot in this class about the art of communications and how we are either bound by a language or we use it as a tool. Humans who desire to use communication as a tool communicate on various levels and styles depending on their goals. Humans, like all animals, can communicate on a very basic level. Animals, for example, have certain sounds that they make when they see some sort of danger or if they want to announce that they see something important. Humans have far more complex language and ability to use that language. A more complex form of communication is when we tailor our words, written or spoken, to achieve certain results. In times of trouble, humans are not limited to yelling out danger. We can explain the nature of the danger and what someone needs to do to avoid it. We can use different words to achieve different objectives. We can make a person look this way or that way, or do whatever we want, all by our selection of the words that we use. We can make things very complex or very simple. And this brings us back to morals and dogma. Why did Pike write Morals and Dogma? And why did he write it in the way that he did? Well, we can't get into the head of someone who has been dead for close to 150 years. But if we look at the time and situation, we can see that the Southern jurisdiction wanted to reorganize and rebuild itself in the mid-1800s. Prior to his becoming Grand Commander, Pike had been appointed to a committee to reorganize the Southern jurisdiction rituals, which were in a debatable state, from near non-existent to disorganized, following some 20 or more years of inactivity and then limited activity. A book explaining the degrees would seem to be of obvious value, but Morals and Dogma is not just a book. What was the purpose of this book? The job of a communicator is to take something, whether it's information, ideas, or such, from one person and present it to others, like the information contained in a book. Pike took complex philosophical discussions and presented them in a book tied to the philosophy of the Scottish Rite. It's true that Pike took generous portions from various esoteric authors and included them in his work, but it would be a mistake to think that Pike did not write the majority of the book, even when we look at the sections written by others. It was Pike who organized, edited, and placed them where he wanted. Albert Pike was clearly very intelligent and gifted. By just looking at Morals and Dogma and the letters that he wrote during the Civil War, it's obvious that he was capable of adjusting the style of his writing depending on his audience. It's understandable why Pike chose a very clear and easy-to-understand style of writing to his superiors during the Civil War. He wanted no confusion or question about anything that he was writing. But why would he choose what can be fairly called an obscure writing style for Morals and Dogma? Was being perfectly understood his goal? Or could his goal have been something very different? As mentioned earlier, we can't get into Pike's head or ask him questions today about his writing style, but there are so many options as to why he structured and wrote Morals and Dogma as he did. It is possible that Pike believed that anyone who had achieved the 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite had received sufficient education in esoteric matters to understand his manner of writing. So let's look at that theory a little closer. The man who introduced Pike to the Scottish Rite was Albert Mackey. Mackey was an educated man who wrote a number of well-respected Masonic books. He even wrote a classic Masonic encyclopedia. Mackey was certainly able to understand the writing style of Morals and Dogma. Pike's Scottish Rite instructors were in New Orleans. Individuals like Charles Lafond de Lauderdale, Claude Samory, and others in the New Orleans Scottish Rite leadership were also clearly able to understand Pike's manner of writing. But what about the rank-and-file Southern Jurisdiction 32nd degree Masons? What about the ones who had not yet received the 32nd degree? What type of Scottish Rite education did they receive? It's hard to say. It's not exactly clear how much Scottish Rite education the average 32nd degree received in the mid to late 1800s, or how much time was normally spent before receiving the degrees. Available records vary as to the time and depth of the education. We might want to say that a good deal of time was spent on education, but proving that may be difficult. Morals and Dogma became a book that might as well have been filled with blank pages. Because the philosophy in the pages of the book was unknown and unread by far too many in the Scottish Rite leadership, it was unknown and unread by most all of the membership. The operational blueprint seemed to be finding ways to assure that money was in the bank, get new members, find new ways for them to attend meetings, and train them for leadership in this organization. That's it. Doing the day-to-day business was commonly seen as the real duty of the Scottish Rite Mason. The goal was not to join, learn, and live the philosophy of the Scottish Rite. This may explain why Morals and Dogma became the most owned yet unread book of the Scottish Rite. It was held up as that massive book of the Scottish Rite that can be read by any with the interest and time, but so few made the time necessary to read it. But then again, maybe Pike only drafted the book to impress or intimidate those in the Southern jurisdiction hierarchy. Maybe by writing the book as he did, those in the leadership might say that Pike was the obvious choice for leading the Southern jurisdiction through those challenging times. He had to be very smart just to have authored the book. Maybe Pike wrote the book with no intention of it being an actual teaching tool, and its only use was to be a resume of sorts for getting to the top of the Scottish Rite. Again, that's only a theory, but a more dark theory. The truth is that I don't know why Albert Pike wrote Morals and Dogma in the manner that he wrote it. I may have thoughts, but they're only thoughts. It's clear that Pike wrote it in that style by choice. But why is a matter of debate. The fact is that what is inside of Morals and Dogma has not been a major influence for many of the Southern jurisdiction Scottish Rite Masons. If he wrote the book with the belief that all 32nds would have received sufficient Scottish Rite education to appreciate and understand the book, he was mistaken. I believe that it is perfectly fair to say that Morals and Dogma has been more of a mascot than an actual Scottish Rite educational tool for most of the time that the book has existed. But times have been slowly changing. Over the years, there has been a recognition by some that Scottish Rite education is exactly what is needed to advance the Scottish Rite. Yes, some still consider a Scottish Rite Valley as being successful if they merely have a successful recruitment campaign, but a change is taking place. Much is happening, and there is reason to expect much more. The good news is that many in leadership positions today recognize the need for genuine Scottish Rite education. The work of educating new members is taking place in more and more areas. New Scottish Rite Masons are learning what it means to be Scottish Rite Masons. Yes, changes are taking place. As for Morals and Dogma, yes, it can be a most difficult reading experience, but it's not a waste of time. The book contains extremely important esoteric and philosophical truths woven into the Scottish Rite theme. And for an even more rewarding experience, I would recommend Arturo de Hoyos' Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma annotated edition. This extraordinary work takes the classic Morals and Dogma and both somewhat modernizes it and explains much of what was behind the words of Pike. I highly recommend this book for any student of the Scottish Rite. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Morals and Dogma. I don't have an answer as to why the book was written as it was written, but I also don't believe it's very important. The book should not be looked at as a Scottish Rite handbook, but as a supplemental to not only the Scottish Rite, but to Masonry and esoteric societies of all flavors. It is a book that should be used, and not one just sitting on your bookshelf.
Freemasonry is not a club. It's a fascinating and intricate system of moral philosophy, and it can easily be overwhelming for a new Mason. My just released The New Mason's book was written to give the new Mason a foundational look at a wide array of indispensable topics in a way that is both engaging and informative. Masonic subjects are presented in a brotherly and welcoming manner, making it easy for new Masons to follow and understand. This book not only offers much-needed Masonic education, but is also designed to make new Masons feel at ease as they are exploring the deeper world of Freemasonry. The New Mason's book is not just a resource, but a companion on the journey of Freemasonry. I'm proud to offer this work as an addition to the quality Masonic education program of any new Mason. Please pick up a copy for you or someone you know at the Cornerstone website. Thank you.